Good evening and welcome to Stony Brook, Manhattan for this program. My name is Michael Zweig. I'm the director of the Center for Study of Working Class Life. We are a co-sponsor of this, a sponsor of it here at Stony Brook, Manhattan. The Center for Study of Working Class Life exists to bring class and class questions into focus in the United States and across the world. I think that it's not hard to understand that what's going on in Israel and Palestine is very much connected to class issues, both there and around the world. So we're especially pleased to be co-sponsoring this event with the U.S. Peace Council and with other organizations who are engaged in these issues and have brought our speaker here tonight. Three housekeeping chores. We are filming, and if anybody has any objection to being on camera, because we will be posting these not for commercial purposes, but we will be posting the video, then just make sure you're not in front of any camera. But you should know that that is going on. And also, if you're interested in bathrooms, out that door in this hallway here, you'll find them in the women's room. Before going any further, I would like to welcome and to recognize Dr. Riyad Mansour, who is here with us tonight, the Palestinian Ambassador to the United Nations. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador. We're pleased to have you here. As I say, we are working with the U.S. Peace Council here this evening, and I want to bring up Mahattan Azad from the U.S. Peace Council to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I just want to take a couple of minutes to thank first of all of you for coming to this meeting. It was a very, very difficult process for us to organize this meeting. It took a lot of convincing to get Aida here, given the situation that is unfolding in Israel and Palestine. In addition to her other involvements in the parliamentary process, she was really concerned that she didn't want to be away from the situation at this time. But we finally begged and cried, and finally she agreed to come. And several times during the past 2-3 days, she mentioned that I wish I was back. And again, I tried to calm her down and have her stay. But this is a unique opportunity for us. And the U.S. Peace Council is really honored to have been able to invite her and bring her here. And I wanted to particularly thank the organizations that helped us and co-sponsored this event. I want to go quickly over the list and mention all of those who have been very helpful to us and in co-sponsoring this event. Of course, Aida is traveling to New Haven tomorrow, meeting with people from Yale University and also making a presentation there. So we're going to be up there. And the organizations that have sponsored these series of speeches, she was at Berkeley College the past 2 days, 2 different campuses, speaking also for faculty and students. In the tri-state area, about 25 organizations really actually co-sponsored and helped us organize this trip. And I want to mention them to acknowledge their support and help. It's Brooklyn for Peace, Brooklyn Peace Council, Central Jersey Coalition Against Endless War, City of New Haven Peace Commission, Code Pink, Greater New Haven Peace Council, International Action Center, Jewish Voice for Peace, New Haven Chapter, Jewish Voice for Peace, New York Chapter, New York City Chapter, New Haven People's Center, New Jersey Peace Action, New Jersey Peace Council, Angel Labor Against War, Angel State Industrial Union Council, Palestinian American Community Center, where she spoke last night actually, People's Organization for Progress in Newark, Promoting Enduring Peace, Queens Peace Council, Tree of Life Foundation, U.S. Labor Against the War, New York City chapter, which also is under the direction of Professor Swag. Veterans for Peace, Chapter 21, New Jersey. Veterans for Peace, Chapter 34, New York City. Veterans for Peace, Iran Working Group, Women's Studies Program at Southern Connecticut State University. I really want to wholeheartedly thank all of them who helped us organize this trip and give us this opportunity. I hope that you will benefit from the meeting that we have organized. Thank you very much.
Well, it's my honor and pleasure to welcome here to Stony Brook, Palestinian-Israeli member of the Knesset. I think the first Palestinian Israeli to be elected from within the Knesset to chair a standing committee of the Knesset, which is the Committee on the Status of Women and Gender Equality in Israel. And a person who's been very active in Israeli politics, in Palestinian politics, in the situation both in its international aspects, but also in the domestic situation inside Israel, which we often don't think about when we think about Israel. And so I think we're going to hear some about what has been going on recently, of course, with all this commotion and all these troubles that are happening right at the moment. But beyond that, sort of strategically, what are the alignment of forces that are at play within Israel, and the class alignment of forces, because it is a place, where there is, through Likud and other parties, a very sharp neoliberal program of free market and privatization and the degradation of life of working people of all sorts. And so without any further ado, I welcome the member of Knesset, Aida Touma-Sliman. Let me just say that she will speak, and maybe for around 40 minutes or so, then we will go to questions, and you will be free just to ask questions and develop the discussion. We do have to be out of here at 9:30.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you. Thank you for, first of all, making the effort and coming to meet me here tonight. And I would like to thank, in the beginning, actually the organizations and the different groups that supported, endorsed, and welcomed and actually organized the whole trip and the whole speaking tour that I've been involved in since Tuesday, actually. And allow me also to give special thanks to dear Rahman Azadu. Without his insistence and without his persistence, I wouldn't have made that decision that I'm not regretting at this point that I made. Actually coming here and meeting all the wonderful people that I met through the different occasions and different lectures that I gave from Tuesday till today. I think when Bahman in the beginning, in the introduction, said that it was really difficult to take that decision and not to cancel this trip, he wasn't exaggerating, because since 2 weeks ago, we are facing back there a very serious deterioration in the situation. It's not like some people ask me, is it a new situation where killing is going on and murdering people and bloodshedding? It is not new, but maybe this time what is making it look a real deterioration more than other times is the fact how the Israeli government, Benjamin Netanyahu government, is behaving through this process, and what kind of policy is led in the last few months since the last elections, continuing what have started even before that election. We cannot forget that just last summer, not this summer, but the summer before, 1 year and a few months ago, there was a huge war going on the people, on the Palestinian people in Gaza, and massive destruction and a lot of murder happened throughout that war. People would like now to look at what's going on back there home, as if the Palestinians were really started these violent actions, as the Israeli government would like to explain, as a response to what is happening in Al-Aqsa. And I've mentioned that even in my speech in the Knesset, in the opening of the winter session in the Knesset this last Monday, that's true. Al-Aqsa Mosque is a very important holy place for not only the Muslims among the Palestinians, but for the whole Palestinians. It's very important for the Muslims all over the world. It's the second holy place for the Muslims all over the world. But I think what is going on in Al-Aqsa cannot be disconnected from the whole political situation and from the policy that the Israeli government is leading in the last few years under the leadership of Netanyahu. What is happening in Al-Aqsa is actually continuation of the policy that Netanyahu over the years is leading to create new realities on the ground. Whoever is following what is happening can understand very clearly that the sentence was given by Netanyahu 2 days before the last election was not only a matter of a statement done for the benefit of the election. He said very clearly, 2 days before the last election, I'm going to do everything to prevent the creation of a Palestinian state. That was a clear statement made by Benjamin Netanyahu 2 days before the election, and actually I think that was one of the rare honest moments in the political career of Netanyahu. Because actually this is the policy that Netanyahu is leading, and want to get to a situation where there is no possibility to continue to think about the two-state solution, and to create a reality on the ground that is leading actually to a one-state. I'm not continuing one-state solution, because it is a one-state much different from what we have in our mind when we mention a one-state solution. Usually those who are defending the one-state solution, they are talking about as a democratic state, a secular state, a state of all of its citizens, Palestinians and Jews living happily ever after. This is not the reality that Netanyahu is trying to create. Netanyahu is trying to create a one apartheid state that is continuing to control as much land, including the land of 1967, and to have maybe some kind of an arrangement for the Palestinians to run part of their civic issues, and of course not to have any equality. And we can be the Palestinian citizen of Israel a good proof to, after 67 years of living under the citizenship, the Israeli citizenship, how really inequalities can be preserved inside the only democratic state in the Middle East, or actually the Jewish democratic, as it is used to be said. Why I'm saying this? Because for me, actually, and for us, we don't see what is happening in the last few days as much as it is horrible. And we are living in a horrible situation in the last 2-3 weeks. It doesn't mean we lived in a good situation before, but what is happening in the last 2-3 weeks of escalation, is a continuous situation. As I mentioned, we tend to forget that there was a war. We tend sometimes, or the media wants us to forget, that actually in Jerusalem itself, Jerusalemite people are facing every day measures of oppression. They are facing every day a situation where their homes are demolished, their homes are confiscated from them. Jerusalemite people are isolated, and I'm talking about the Palestinian and I'm talking about East Jerusalem, just to put things in context. They are isolated totally from their own people in the West Bank, and Jerusalem is facing very hard economic situation, high unemployment. More than 70% of the people of Jerusalem are living, the Palestinians in Jerusalem are living under poverty line. A politics of ethnic cleansing of people, and ethnic cleansing doesn't have to be always with massive power or murder of people, but by the fact that you are depriving people of continuing to live in their own homes, in their own city, by taking their IDs and not allowing them to come back, you are actually changing the demography of the place. And in Jerusalem, it's not only changing the demography, but also changing, let's say, the balance, or Judaizing, what is called Judaizing East Jerusalem. But everyone who goes to Jerusalem and visit Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, can see the changes that are happening on the ground, and can see that the fact that people are facing such kind of conditions has to be in a situation of, first of all, anger, feelings of frustration, and hopelessness. And we know those kinds of feelings might lead to what? On top of everything, I think that what is happening, we tend also to forget, or to try to forget, or the media wants us to forget, that only 2 months ago, there was a horrible crime committed by settlers that resemble exactly the crimes that are happening in the last years by settlers, committed by settlers against Palestinians. And I'm talking about the Douma crime. I'm talking about burning a whole family while sleeping in their own home by settlers, sending torches and burning the house, and actually ending up with the mother and the father and the small kid burned to death, and one child is still trying to survive. This crime, you heard probably about it, and I know that it reached the American media and it reached the international media. But I want to emphasize here that there's almost everyday crimes committed by settlers, but settlers are terrorizing Palestinian people, are burning huge amounts of lands planted with very old olive trees, which is a main source of living for many Palestinian people in the West Bank. They are terrorizing people while they are going and preventing people to reach their lands and to use that land. When the situation is like this, when in 2 weeks, more than 1,400 Palestinians were injured, either by live bullets or by what is called rubber bullets, which are actually only rubber covering real bullets, or by other means. More than 1,400, more than 33 Palestinians were killed. And yes, there were Israeli citizens also injured by different Palestinian actions. And all of that should be looked at, or the Israeli government is trying to present it as a sudden eruption that happened by Palestinians. Suddenly, I don't know what happened to them, slept over one night and decided next day, out of no reason, to start stabbing people all over. You have to understand that eventually, for me, violence has been rejected always. And I'm not a person who will try to defend any kind of violence. I dedicate many years of my life to work against violence. But on the other hand, I'm repeating here what I said before. Nobody can expect from people who are living under occupation for so many years, suffering from oppression, suffering from murder, suffering from humiliations, just to throw, as we do in our traditions, rice and roses on the occupier. The history have taught us very clearly that people who are under occupation usually resist the occupation. And people who are under occupation have the right to resist the occupation. So actually, whoever is leading a policy that is preserving occupation, that is enlarging settlements, that is depriving people from their right to continue to live in dignity and freedom in their homeland, should expect, and not only expect, violent actions, but also to be responsible for those actions. Because actually, who is responsible for this deterioration is the occupying government of Netanyahu, who is leading both people, Israelis and Palestinians, into a situation of despair and of violent actions. In the last election, Netanyahu also said a very, it looks like the last election was one of the elections that got Netanyahu to reveal many of his hidden agendas. First one was when he said he's going to prevent the Palestinian state, and second, when he said on the same day of election that be careful, my citizens, and he of course intended for the Jewish citizens, come and vote because the Arabs are coming in thousands to vote and to change the situation and to bring as if down the right-wing government. And I would, at that point, the only thing that I could think about, and any decent person should be thinking about, if such a sentence was used anywhere in the world, warning that the Jews in that country are using their civil, basic right of voting, what would have the international community said about that? How the reaction would be in that situation? And on the other hand, when a prime minister, we are not talking about a candidate who is coming from nowhere and trying to grab the attention of the media. We are talking about someone who has been leading the country and most probably will continue to lead the country was after that election, saying about 20% of its citizens that they are actually real danger. And as if by going and voting, we are committing a crime and we are committing a terror action. That was the atmosphere during the election. And actually, this atmosphere and this incitement against the Palestinian citizens of Israel is continuing. Is continuing in a way that put a lot of questions in mind about the intentions of Benjamin Netanyahu and his government when they are inciting in such a way against Palestinian community inside Israel and against the Arab case in the last few days also. Netanyahu, in his speech on Monday in the Knesset, in the official speech opening the winter term, he said that the Arab case, including me, modestly, marched under the ISIS flags. Of course, I don't have here to deny it, I hope. I hope nobody is questioning if we did it or not. Netanyahu, instead of understanding that that kind of policy is making the two people pay a high price of blood and agony and future, actually. We are paying from our future, from children's future, a high price for this policy. He continued the policy of incitement against anything that is Palestinian. What is happening back there today, and I will continue later to try to explain also why the reaction of the Israeli state is in such way, or the Jewish Israeli general public. This kind of incitement actually, as I said, was led in the last few days and got us into a situation where, after calling the Jewish Israeli citizens who have weapons to go around carrying their weapons in the streets to defend themselves, and I'm saying to defend themselves because actually what is happening today is a very clear, open executions taken and made by, most of the time and many times, either by the police forces or by citizens against Palestinians. 2 days ago, I saw something in the, on Facebook which shocked me, although I know exactly what is the situation, that a Jewish Israeli was wearing a t-shirt saying, "Don't worry, I'm a Jewish Yemeni." A Jewish Yemeni, meaning he is an Oriental Jew, because there were 2 cases when Jewish right-wing Israelis thought that this person is an Arab because he looks like an Arab, and they were stabbed. So this young man had a t-shirt saying, "Don't worry, don't be afraid, I'm only a Yemeni Jew," which means he's trying to protect himself. This is a set of mind that exactly show the situation that we reached. When 20% of the citizens are incited against in such a way, when fear is getting to the hearts of the people, of the normal people, and incitement is leading them to be able to commit crimes of execution or stabbing or violating other human beings just because they are suspecting that they are Palestinians or Arabs, I call that it's a policy of all the Palestinians are criminals or terrorists unless they prove otherwise. This is the kind of environment that is created lately. Now, some people would say to me, this is a result of the actions that happened in the last 2 weeks by Palestinians. And I refuse this claim because I've been there through the Gaza war. I participated in the demonstrations against the Gaza war, and we almost were lynched by right-wing activists, thousands of them, who came to prevent any kind of raising a voice against the war, if it is a Jew or an Arab. This policy of incitement, this policy of continuous occupation, this policy of embracing the settlers and bringing them into the mainstream inside Israel by having the party which is representing the settlers inside the government, in the coalition, shows very clearly that this kind of atmosphere existed before and leading into increasing racism inside the Israeli society. Now we know that in conflict situation, when people are feeling fear, it doesn't matter if it is a real danger existing, or at least they are convinced that they are under this danger. People might feel that fear, but when they feel that fear, they can get polarized more and more and drafted away from each other on those bases. And this is what is happening in the Israeli society. Beside the continuous occupation, beside the fact that there is a huge shift to the right in the general political arena in Israel, because to tell you the truth, these days I stopped using right and left in my terminology of looking at the political scene in Israel, because it looks like all the country has shifted to the right. When Netanyahu's government bring to the Knesset a law that anybody who is convicted in throwing stones can get a sentence up till 15 years. And half or 2/3 of the so-called opposition and the so-called left vote with the government on that law, then there is no opposition actually, except maybe the joint list that I'm part of, and Meretz. When Herzog is actually asking to calm down the situation by putting a siege and blocking East Jerusalem, then forget about what is called left. When the opposition is voting with a law that we call the reunification of Palestinian families, or it is an order of the citizenship law that forbid actually Palestinians who got spouses from the West Bank to give them their citizenship or to reunify with them inside Israel. More than 20,000 families inside Israel. One of the spouses is a Palestinian or Jordanian who is not allowed to stay inside Israel since 12 years, and every 2 years they renew that order. And you have what is called the opposition voting with this such a thing. And when you have the opposition, of course, have also Lieberman, which is clear he is going to vote with that law. But to have the so-called left, Zionist left, voting with this, and I know some people are looking at me that I'm using Zionist left in one sentence. It's only, I'm using the terminology as it is. I don't believe that there is a Zionist left. There's a huge built-in contradiction in such terminology, but I'm using it in order to make you understand about whom I'm talking. When the Zionist left also vote for that kind of law, then you have to stop and ask yourself what kind of policy is running inside Israel. I'm saying this because also beside all of that, Benjamin Netanyahu's government have to develop, as was said before, a policy that can guarantee a base, can guarantee an infrastructure inside Israel that continue to support the continuous occupation and continue to support the hatred policy that is existing. And I think one of the drastic policies that is led by Benjamin Netanyahu and can guarantee and reinforce the continuous, the ultra-right-wing policy in Israel is the economic policy that is led by Benjamin Netanyahu and his government. The very violent, in my opinion, new liberal economy policy that is existing for many years now in Israel. It's enough to know that maybe one of, when Netanyahu actually was the Minister of Finance in Israel, it started the shift into the more new liberal economy and developed it over the year. Today, as much as I know, I was surprised again to read that actually the budget for military or militarization, and of course it is called in Israel budget for the defense budget, and I don't use that terminology. The militarization budget in Israel has increased in 60% in the last 7 years under Netanyahu's leadership. 60% it increased. And when we are asking, I'm talking about the budget, the budget dedicated from the state budget. I'm not talking here about the support that is coming from the United States to Israel by either financial support or military and weapon support. I'm talking about how much of the budget, state budget, is dedicated for militarization. Adding to this, if you take into consideration the budgets allocated for settlements and building settlements and securing settlements and roads to the settlements, you can understand actually how the people of Israel, both Jews and Arabs, are deprived of basic rights, of education, of health, of other welfare whatsoever. Because you will understand then the money is going where. This is creating an increasement in poverty rates inside the Israeli society. Of course, this is not the only reason. There are more poor people inside Israel. The last statistics shows that the average of poverty percentage in Israel is reaching 22-23%. But you have to take into consideration that poverty in Israel have also national image also, because among the Arab, 53 among the Palestinian Arab citizens of Israel, 53 of us, 53% of us are living under poverty line. So actually leading people into a situation of very deep poverty, of high unemployment. And when we are talking about unemployment, again, unemployment also have a national version, because actually unemployment among Arab citizens of Israel is much higher than it is in general in Israel, taking into consideration that only 23% of the Arab Palestinian women are integrated in the workforce inside Israel. On top of that, why poverty is accelerating, why poverty is increased in Israel, we have to take into our mind, or to remind ourselves that actually one of the very clear components of the new liberal economy that is led in the last few years is the privatization policy. Very massive privatization processes are happening in Israel on different levels. Most of the services existing and supposed to be given by the government is going through processes of privatization. The last thing that we had to take a decision about in the Knesset was what was called the reform in psychological health. I'm sure I'm not.
Mental health. Yeah.
Thank you. And through that reform, actually, the state gave the different companies that are running all the issue of health and giving the services to people to run the mental health also. And we are seeing how psychologists, psychiatrists are fired from their work, are actually has now to be contracted not through the government but through these companies with much lower salaries and with a lot of losing of their social benefits, because actually this is the only way they are able now to continue to work. This is one even example that I can give, but you can take into consideration that with privatization always comes also indirect employment. Indirect employment with very low salaries, with lack of social benefits, etc. Why I'm mentioning all of that? Because actually what was happening through this process of privatization, there was a parallel process going on of weakening organizing or the ability of the working class to organize itself, even through trade union or the general trade union of Israel, the Histadrut. Whoever can observe what's happening in the last few years, you can see at the contrary, when usually you have such kind of problems and the working class is facing such high challenges, you expect there is more struggles going on led by the trade unions in order to try to change that situation or to stop the drastic policy. The situation in Israel is in the opposite direction. Meaning over the years, there are less struggles led by the trade unions for the benefit of the working class. And the working class itself actually fragmentized because of many reasons. First of all, because of nationalities, meaning the Arab workers are facing a lot of problems. I mentioned unemployment, but there is also problems that we of racism in workplace. We have seen in the last few days even already people are fired from their work only for expressing their political position of what's going on. We saw that through the war on Gaza and etc. People are many times not hired because they are Arabs, because they are Palestinians. And another factor of fragmentization of the working class is Also the policy of hiring and the policy. You can find today companies in Israel that have 5 different ways of hiring people, if it is indirect, through contractors, direct contracts, and different levels of salaries that are not actually, have no clear policy of how things are running in this workplace. And I'm talking about very huge companies, including, for example, the electricity company in Israel. This is creating a situation where the working class itself, or the people, are more focusing on those who are in the same situation rather than leading more organized struggles against the general policy. In my opinion, this situation is actually a very good infrastructure for higher racism, for less ability to unify and to try to struggle against that kind of drastic policies. And this is guaranteeing actually the increasement that we are seeing of tendency toward the right rather than to policies that can guarantee better future for both people in our country. After depressing you so much, and I still believe that there is a way out of this situation. Some people call it irrational optimism, and some people call it mechanism of surviving. And I think it is maybe mechanism of surviving, because, and part of it also, a little bit of education that I got by reading some history, that there is no way that that people can continue to accept to live in such situation. I truly believe that people are searching always for better way of living. And I truly believe that those who are living under occupation will continue to struggle. Sometimes I'm asked, and I've been asked since the beginning of this week, what really can change the situation? And I know there's a list that I would like to read and to tell you what can change the situation. But first of all, what really can change the situation is the fact that the Palestinian people are not giving up their struggle for freedom and liberation. Second, I think the fact that Israelis also are getting tired of this situation. All of us are getting tired of paying such high price for that kind of policy, for continuous occupation. But still, those two are not enough alone. Those two, and maybe this what convinced me, beside the insistence that Bahman did to be here. What made me come here is the fact that I believe that solidarity with the two people who are trying to end the occupation, at least the Palestinian people in the beginning, and the democratic forces inside Israel, that are trying to stop the occupation. The solidarity is a very, international solidarity is a very important component. And when I'm addressing the American people, there is no way not to ask you, not to beg you, not to demand you to stand up to your administration and say, we cannot tolerate anymore that our money is used to kill other people. Each one had paid taxes actually gave money to one of the bullets, maybe, that killed one Palestinian. And I think it's about time to say it very clearly, not in our names and not by our money. And it's very important. I truly believe that that can change something. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the day after. And I was telling now my nephew who's sitting here, who is, by the way, he's an American, not paying taxes yet. I was telling him, I feel that I'm more than ever what has been called by Emir Habibi, a novelist and a great leader that we respect, that I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist because I believe in the right of people, of liberation, that eventually the Palestinian people will be liberated from occupation and the Israelis will be liberated from their occupation. And I'm pessimist because I don't see it happening very soon. And I truly believe that if you help us, it might be sooner. Thank you.
Number 3, and then we'll come back to have some discussion from the chair here. So, and we have some time, so that's great. Questions, comments? There's number 1. There's number 2. There's number 3. We'll stop with that. Remember your number now, because 1 I believe was right there. Please, and wait for the mic. It's coming. Is that mic turned on? Oops, oh, you gotta stay away from the
It's
speaker.
very close to them.
You gotta stay away from the speaker. Okay, ask it and then I'll repeat it from here.
I'll be loud. When do you see the next Palestinian elections for president, and how likely is it that a woman could win that? And then my second question is, how widely known is it inside Israel about the Israeli involvement in ISIS, in funding, arming, and training, and treating ISIS, especially around the Golan?
So did people hear that question in the back? Everybody heard that? Okay. 2 was in here somewhere. There's 2. Please stand up. And I think it's safe to use the mic if you're far enough away from the speaker.
Thank you very much, really, for a very wonderful. Is this better?
Step back. Away from the speaker. That's where the feedback comes. No, I'm sure that'll be fine.
Is that better? I did want to ask you to describe a little bit some of the actions, unified actions in Israel of anti-Zionist forces and Palestinian forces. Just picking up on the importance of solidarity. And also the challenge is what we do here, and I'm so glad you raised that. I was asked to announce a very important demonstration that is taking place Sunday here in New York at Times Square. I think many people here know there's a very right-wing demonstration that was called Jewish Lives Matter, which is an appropriation, a very inappropriate one, of the Black Lives Matter movement. And thousands of people were announced as going. In response to that, young Palestinians have called a demonstration, really in solidarity with Palestine, in solidarity with the uprising, and it has drawn the response of thousands of people on Facebook, at least, in the last 24 hours. So for anyone who can join on Sunday, that's 4 o'clock, Times Square, at 49th Street and 7th Avenue. And I think it's important, Jewish and Palestinian and everyone who stands in solidarity with Palestine, to be there.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Number 3, right here. And the mic comes right there.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. I'm very active with a group in New York called Adal in New York, the New York Campaign for the Boycott of Israel. We do a lot of boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaigns. Tonight there was a protest at Rachel, the Israeli cultural ambassador of Israel. He was singing over in City Winery, or the other side of Manhattan. We had about 60 people out there chanting and music. And some people here were there first, and we went from one to the other because we wanted to see you. So I'm curious, you talk about international solidarity, but to us, it's one thing to go out and protest when especially emergent situations happen, but we need to be doing it day after day, week after week, month after month around campaigns, whether it's against Hewlett-Packard, which is making the identity books, just like Polaroid did in South Africa, or SodaStream, or there's just a million different things that we, or when cultural workers come. So you didn't mention the BDS campaigns. I'm curious to take on what's going on with that internationally.
Thank you. Aida, please.
Well, when the presidential elections, actually, maybe Mr. Ambassador can answer this better than I am.
Soon, inshallah.
Soon, inshallah. I think that.
By the way, we had also a woman that ran against
Samiha Khalil.
And she received 22% of the votes.
Yeah. You see, I knew you would have answered better than I am. But we have to keep in mind, and sometimes many people ask when the elections and why it's not coming. I think we have to keep in mind that Palestine is still under occupation. Palestine is not a state yet that is sovereign and can really have a democratic life the way it should be. So this is part of it. How many people in Israel know about ISIS and how much Israel is involved in training ISIS and etc.? Maybe none. This is not an issue that is written about or published in Israel. There is some, and I addressed in one of my speeches in the parliament, and everybody thought that I'm crazy, that actually mentioned the fact that there is such an involvement, and we are seeing only part of it when the injured fighters of ISIS come and get actually a treatment in the Israeli hospitals. But of course it was like more, really, the response was more as if I am hallucinating, as if I'm not talking anything that is related to reality. This is not a mention that this is not any that is raised in the Israeli media or actually talked about. Unified actions between anti-Zionists and Palestinians. Actually, in the last few days, it has been known that it's even there is unified actions with those who are still identifying themselves as Zionists, but at least they are willing to rally or to go out against occupation, and they are anti-occupation for many reasons. Some of them are anti-occupation because why we need so many Arabs around us, and let's them be there and we are here and end the situation. And even with those, we are willing to rally against occupation. And there are actions, but to tell the truth, the whole what is called peace movement in Israel is in a real crisis, and whenever there is a situation like we are facing or a war situation, we can see immediately that people are withdrawing and people are going back to the national consensus and more defending, how you say it, Jewish life matter, or how lives matter. This is like the slogan that usually unify people and withdrawing them back to the national consensus. But in the last few days, and tomorrow I know, there are many actions are going on. Yesterday there were 2 or 3 actions of Jews and Arabs demonstrating in order to emphasize the fact that they are anti-occupation and anti-racism, something that we are facing very much lately in the last few days. There is tomorrow a big demonstration because the right wing, and I can say very clearly the fascists actually, are demonstrating in front of the house of the head of the joint list, my list in the parliament. They declared that they are coming with thousands of people to demonstrate in front of his house. And on the other side, Jewish and Arabs declared that they are going to protest in order to also protect him and his family. By the way, we were informed yesterday by the Knesset security that there are real threats on his life from the right-wing activists, and he was asked to change his routine and change the places that he goes to. So there are actions taken. Tomorrow there will be a demonstration in West Jerusalem, led mainly by Jewish activists who are anti-occupation. They are leading a big demonstration in West Jerusalem, and you have to understand, to go out in such demonstration in these days, you have to be very brave to do it. Because actually there is a real danger on those people when they are demonstrating, and that's why I'm talking in a real respect to this activity that is going to be tomorrow night in Jerusalem. BDS. When I said international solidarity, I meant all types of solidarity. And I mentioned that because I believe that people choose how to express their solidarity in different means. And I know that the BDS movement is growing bigger and bigger in the world, especially in Europe, and it is reaching the United States, and there were some decisions in some universities, etc., and there are more activists around this issue. And I respect that, and I think that we have a law in Israel that forbids supporting boycott. And it's really very strange, because the first thing that Lieberman and other racists have raised in the last 2 weeks is to boycott Arab businesses inside Israel. So what I wanted to say is that I think this is one of the most peaceful anti-occupation actions that is happening, and it is the right of people to use any tool or any way of resistance of occupation and showing solidarity with the people. But it is, as I mentioned, it is up to each group or each people to choose the way they want to express their solidarity.
So, 1, 2, 3, oh gosh, I already see 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that might be it for the evening. But we'll see where we get. Where was 1? One is here, and then 2 is there, 3, 4, 5. 1, I forgot where it is. Who's 1?
Yeah.
Larry, that's you.
Yeah.
Okay, could you swing that camera to get the people asking questions if that's possible? And Mike and then Larry, maybe you need to go away from this.
I keep on.
Go out there, I'll come over.
Is this okay?
That's fine.
So I just want to thank you again for your remarks because, you know, as I'm sure you're aware, this kind of analysis that you gave is not something that most of the people living in this country get to hear at all. And I wish there was a way to get you on television, to get you, I mean, because it's so important. And in particular, what I'm grateful for is the kind of analysis you did of what's happening economically in Israel, the privatization, the attacks on all working people. And I'm wondering if you could say a little more on whether there are struggles related to the economy, to the kind of growing poverty, the attacks on working rights that are linked to the occupation and those links are being made. How are those links being made between the struggle against poverty and economic oppression and the political oppression of the Palestinian people? And if you could just say a little more on that.
Thank you. Where was 2? Where's 2? Oh, very good.
Thank you very much for the excellent program. I'd like to know your opinion of American media coverage on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I'm sure that's a loaded question. And also, I'd like to follow up on what this woman said here about the protest that's going to be held on Sunday in Times Square. We are asking people if they have a keffiyeh, wear your keffiyeh, and if you have a Palestinian flag, bring your flag. Thank you.
3. To the mic.
Hi, Joe Jamison, Queens Peace Council. This is more of a suggestion than a question. Since we have been joined by the Palestinian Ambassador to the UN, I wonder if there is an update on activity in the UN regarding the latest upsurge in violence. Could you give us a few minutes on that with the permission of the podium and the chair?
Maybe what we should do, that's very good. Ambassador, you want to just come to that right now and deal with it? And then we'll continue with 4 and 5.
Why don't we continue with 4?
All right, we'll continue with 4 and 5, and then we'll give you the floor to respond to what's going on in the United Nations. I know we had a conversation earlier, you said it was a good day today. I think that is the news right there for people sitting in the room. Where was 4?
Hi, thank you very much. Aaron Duncan, Queens. Yes, when New York City Council people are elected, they get invited to Israel. A group of us went to see Jimmy Van Brenner and asked him what they were doing, why were they going, and they seemed to be like it was a good thing for them all to get together in this explanation. And I told them, it sounded like a bunch of schoolboys, out in a sort of like picnic. Can you tell us more of what they do over there? Whether they're, whether there was pressure on them to go to the West Bank, and anything you can give us to throw at them when we see them. Thank you.
For those who are American politicians who are visiting Israel. 5. Right there is 5. Go right ahead. Wait, the mic is coming.
Okay. I have a several-part question. I'd like to know how the picture that you have portrayed affects women, both Jewish women and Palestinian women. And I'm part of Women in Black Union Square, and one of my favorite signs that we hold is, and it's an old one, Palestinian and Israeli, the Jewish women say the occupation is killing us all. So how has that been expressed? What has been the role of women in organizing against not only the occupation, but what's going on now?
Thank you. I think that's the 5 that we said, and before Aida, we get to your response, let's have the Ambassador Mansour from the Palestinian Ambassador to the United Nations. If you'd like to maybe get a mic to the ambassador, or if you'd like to come up here, come on up.
Thank you. First of all, let me just say that I am so happy to be listening to Aida and for her brilliant analysis about the situation in Palestine and Israel. And we are so proud of our brothers and sisters who are in the unified list. This is the first time in the history of elections inside Israel in which the different Arab-Israeli, meaning Palestinian Arab-Israeli political groups unified their efforts and ran in one list. We think that that is historic, and that is something that could contribute in a significant way to moving us in the direction of peace on the basis of allowing the Palestinian people to succeed in ending the occupation and enjoying the independence of our state, and therefore to save the two-state solution, where we can open doors for the two people who are living in two separate states, equal states, although not necessarily in size, so that we begin a new chapter in the relationship between the two peoples, and who knows, we could do remarkable things if peace to take place between us instead of the continuation of fighting, hatred, incitement, and deepening the division between us. I know many of the members of the Arab list, members of the Knesset, and this is the first time that I meet Aida, and I'm extremely impressed. Of course, the other ones are as impressive as her, and they are really outstanding leaders that are defending the cause in the most effective and principled way. And also I want to thank Afshin, my friend from a long time, for inviting me to this event and allowing me to listen to Aida's speech, to listen to your good questions, and to the way she answered them. Now, about updating, we have been very consumed with non-stop contacts and efforts at the United Nations with members of the Security Council, with the Office of the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, with the President of the General Assembly, in order to see the United Nations, particularly the Security Council, to shoulder its responsibility in bringing peace and stopping the bloodshed, in which the receiving party to this massive amount of bloodshed and loss of life is the Palestinian people who live under occupation. We lost so far 35 Palestinians since the beginning of this month. We are talking only about 2 weeks. And we have more than 4,600 injured, 600 of them with live bullets, another 600 with rubber-coated bullets, and thousands with different kinds of injuries, mainly from inhaling tear gas, poisonous gases and smells. and leading, to suffering of people and needing some treatment. Of course, the large number of the casualties are children and women. Large number of the injured are also under 18 years old. And it is really sad and tragic that the Israeli occupying authority is mobilizing a massive war machine to try to suppress and to continue to oppress an entire nation. And what is also tragic, that the oppressors, the occupiers, are blaming the victim for the violence they are unleashing against us. And by the way, this is not new in the case of the Israeli colonizers or occupiers. This is through history. All colonizers and occupiers always blame the victims for their violence, for their ruthlessness. But I don't believe that in the evolutions of humanity today that this kind of rhetoric can be accepted by civilizations and by people of today. In fact, we had an emergency session in the Security Council today, and the Israeli representative tried to push this kind of argument. And if one to listen very closely to the 15 members of the Security Council, one can say, including the representative of the United States of America, that that kind of argument was not, accepted. So that when I was asked about today, I said it was a positive day, because it is good to know that there is still a sense of justice and a sense of understanding, the suffering of the Palestinian people by member states in the Security Council, which is the body that's supposed to deal with the maintenance of international peace and security. And I said in my statement today, and also in the press conference outside, that what led to this emergency session is the steadfastness of our people. Because no matter what the occupiers try to do, they cannot break the will of our people. And also that the Israeli occupying authority and even the mayor of the so-called Jerusalem, when he called for building an additional militia, in calling on all the civilians, the Jews, to carry weapons, he proved two things. This facade of the unity of the city of Jerusalem did not last or survive the test of 2 weeks of confrontation. So he is the one, he is proving that he is the mayor of only the Jews of West Jerusalem and the settlers in occupied East Jerusalem. And the other thing is the separation. They are now isolating all the Palestinian Arab communities in East Jerusalem, which means that they are proving, and he is proving, that his city is not united. And this delusion that of a unified city, the eternal capital of Israel, did not survive the test of 2 weeks of this massive confrontation. So we asked in the Security Council that we wanted this bloodshed to be stopped immediately. And for the bloodshed to be stopped immediately, we want to see the withdrawal of all of the militaristic manifestations in Israel, whether the army, the police, the security, the armed settlers, the new militias proposed by the mayors and others, to move away from our communities, to move away from the places of confrontation, because if they want de-escalation, you cannot have de-escalation while you are continuing to have thousands of soldiers suppressing our people, threatening their life, and surrounding them. So that's the second thing that we asked for. And the third thing that we asked for was that we want all settlers to be disarmed. And the Security Council in 1994 adopted a resolution after the massacre in Al-Haram al-Ibrahimi in Hebron, Resolution 904, in which it called for, among other things, one, to provide us with international protection, and the second thing, to disarm the settlers. And that resolution has not been implemented along with other resolutions, but it was implemented in a small part during the time when Netanyahu became the prime minister for the first time. And when he became prime minister at that time, he accepted to bring 37 individuals from the Nordic countries wearing white shirts without weapon, and they are still in Al-Khalil until today, providing some form of protection for us. So the third thing that we asked for, or the fourth thing, we want international protection. Because the occupying power is responsible for providing protection of the civilian population under occupation. And once the occupying power becomes the source of lack of protection, or the party that threatens the life of the people that it's supposed to protect, then it means that it is abdicating its responsibility to provide protection. And if that is the case, we came to the Security Council, you have to provide us with protection until the withdrawal of the Israeli forces from our land and the independence of our state. And the last thing that we asked for, we said that we want the maintenance of the status quo on Al-Haram al-Sharif and Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was put in place for a long period of time, which means that this place is for Muslims, whether they are Palestinians or from other countries. So people, the Israeli occupying authority should respect the right of Muslims to worship in peace and safely in that place. That doesn't mean that people cannot visit. They have been visiting for a long period of time, as long as they are not desecrating the place, threatening to divide it, threatening to build a synagogue there, or threatening to destroy it in order to build another synagogue in that region. If they want to practice their religious activities, there are many places they can build synagogues wherever they want to, but why do they have to come to this place and to deny the Palestinian Muslims and other Muslims for worship there? So in order to guarantee the status quo, we said once we start discussing the issue of protection, we would like to see temporary international presence around Al-Aqsa Mosque, not inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, not to change the status quo, but to guarantee the maintenance of the status quo, because we do not trust Prime Minister Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu and all his representatives, they keep repeating every day, we do not want to change the status quo. The Deputy Ambassador in the Security Council, he said, we don't want to change the status quo. These are lies of Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian people, to incite. The new Israeli ambassador spoke to the media outside. He said that the Muslims should thank us for allowing them to come to the Al-Haykal, what is they call it, the Mount, the Temple Mount, where they should thank us for allowing them to come to the Temple Mount to pray. The one outside changing the status. It is the Temple Mount, and he is granting us, he is so kind to us by allowing us to come and pray. And the one inside, he said, we do not want to change the status quo, and Abu Mazen is a liar, and Abu Mazen inciting, and before they accuse the Palestinian leadership, they should get their act together. Are they changing the status quo, or are they not changing the status quo? So therefore, we do not trust the Israeli government when they keep saying that they don't want to change the status quo. Their actions speak louder than what they say. Therefore, we want guarantees to maintain the safety and the security and the maintenance of the status quo on the Al-Aqsa Mosque by the presence of international observers. So we did all these things today. We're beginning the discussion on the issue of international, observers or presence to provide us with international protection until the end of occupation. And it is not going to be easy. The French also today circulated a draft presidential statement that has some good elements. We will continue the negotiations and the discussions. There will be a ministerial meeting on the same issue on Thursday, and I hope by that time that the bloodshed to be stopped, the military forces and manifestations of the occupying authorities to be removed away from our people, and to begin the discussion on providing international peace and security. And let me just tell you, if that flexible position by us and by the international community is not going to be legislated in the Security Council in a form of resolution or a presidential statement or arrangement to provide us with protection, we have other options. We are ready and willing to go in an emergency session in the General Assembly to take the appropriate steps that we can without the threat of a veto. We will keep you informed. We are proud of our people. They are fighting very heroically. Their will is so strong that we cannot be broken. We are dead determined to end the occupation and to have our independence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Ambassador, for your kind words at the beginning. Thank you. Actually, the question about the struggle of the on economic issues, is it politicized? Is it really making the relations between the political situation and the social and economic situation? I can say one of the main failures of the summer protest that happened 2 years ago, mainly led by the mid-class against the situation of the housing problem in Israel. The main failure came out because nothing was politicized in that protest. And actually the connections between the occupation, the neoliberal policy and the social situation were never, and in most of the different struggles is not made in Israel. And actually the Histadrut, the general trade union, its main policy is in two words: depoliticization and apolitical, and they are apolitical body. This is what is led and what is announced by the leadership of the Histadrut. That's why we think it's very difficult to reach a real achievements at this point if this is the main idea of how the struggle of a working class should be led. And actually most of the strikes that were led by different groups of workers were finished and killed and oppressed by the trade union making agreements that did not satisfy the workers themselves, but because the law in Israel that the general or the Histadrut is able even to negotiate in name of groups of workers that are not organized in the Histadrut. So even if you are a worker that is not organized in that level, the Histadrut can come, and you are leading a struggle, can come and actually lay its hands on the struggle and negotiate in the name of those who are struggling and make deals. And that's what happened when the doctors physicians were on a strike. That's what happened when other workers were the social workers, for example. That was a famous strike that happened 2 years ago. And there is a lot of analysis and information spreaded about the connection actually and the relation between the leadership of the Histadrut and many of the leaders of the big international even companies that are working inside Israel. How it is for the issue of the politicians in New York, I think that well, this is part of the process of the relations that are existing between politicians in the United States and Israel, and part of the good work led by AIPAC among American politicians. And I think there is a need to demand from those politicians also to dedicate some time and go and visit the West Bank, and in this case not to ask the Israelis to organize for them to visit the West Bank, because they will end up visiting settlements actually, but to try to develop different channels with the Palestinians and the Palestinian Authority so that they can get at least the narrative and the information that you never get in the American media. I'm answering the question about what I think about the American media. To tell the truth, I'm not living here, and I'm not following always how the media here is presenting, but to tell you the truth, by going and meeting just the average American in the street, I can tell what the media is telling you. So actually, what is the media telling you when it is at all mentioning the issue? Because I think there is lack of information, there is very distorted image or picture or analysis or information that is given to the American people. But as I was telling also some of the students that I met in the universities and the colleges, that might have been an excuse for my generation, that the media did not bring the information to me. But this is not an excuse for the young people who are living today and connected so much to their iPhones that can bring the whole world into their hands and in front of them and can get all the information they need. That was an excuse because we were deprived of their accessibility to information. Today, the whole world is existing there in the social media, and they are very good at it, actually more than our generation, and they should be using it in a better way. But it's not only the media. I think in order to prepare people to be critical and to prepare people to be curious and to prepare people to respect other people all over the world, you have to have a different education system and to have a different way of living, so that such kind of citizens who are looking for information and looking for the real story can be existing there. First of all, I would like to say that I have deep respect to any women in black. And it's not by chance that this is my favorite color, because for 2 years I was women in black, and whenever I have the chance on Friday to participate in Women in Black, I do. and better be ready always to do it, you know, wearing black. But actually, no, really, maybe I'm saying it and it sounds that, but I really respect the fact that there are women who are still standing up there, if it's here or back home, to say very, as you mentioned, a clear message: we are anti-occupation. We are for the both people. But for my regret, Women in Black in Israel has reached a point where there were 42 vehicles going on, different points where women at certain years, we were almost 42 places where women demonstrated as Women in Black. I don't know if everybody know what is Women in Black, but it's a movement that was really took a brave position when women started every Friday at rush time, when everybody, rush hour, everybody going home, to stand up in junctions of street, delivering one message: we are against occupation, we want to end it. And I think what happened to the, and I mentioned, to the peace movement in Israel happened to the Women in Black. And what happened to the trade unions happened to Women in Black in Israel. Meaning, you cannot be only protesting without making the relations and connecting the resource and the root causes of the continuous crisis. And only at a certain point you cannot just say, I'm only anti-occupation, because if you do not politicize people who are part of the process, any crisis can bring them apart. And that's what happened exactly. The first group that I participated in, Brogan, did not exist because after a discussion and disagreements about the war, the Gulf War, that far. So actually, there is how this situation is affecting women. Of course, I can speak how militarization and diverting budgets to militarization is affecting women who are even not the top priority on the civil agenda, and how militarization can be double budget of health in Israel and 150% if you compare it to the budget for education. And of course this is affecting women's lives, but mainly it is affecting women in the level of security. Women are more vulnerable in these situations, and we have seen that in the past. When in the first Intifada, the feminist Israeli movement was warning that the excessive violence that is used by the soldiers against the Palestinians, and the legitimization of using force and power and violence against those who you don't agree with, will come as a backlash into the Israeli homes and against the Israeli women as gender-based violence. Everybody was laughing at them. Today there are researchers in the mainstream academy, not in gender faculties or by feminists, but by mainstream scientists who are examining this issue, because that's true. Whenever there is escalation on a political level, there is escalation of violence against women in the civil life. And I can continue to give more and more examples, but I think the most damage that this situation have affected women, that it weakened the feminist movement by the different discussions that were going on, and the fact that part of those who supported women's rights, and I'm not saying feminists, but those who supported women's rights, because not every supporter of women's rights is feminist, sometimes choose to be in the mainstream and to adopt some of the existing ideas under the slogans of being Zionist, and to quit the real struggle of making the relations between the basics of feminism, that personal is political, and that political is also, that social is also political, and to make the connection between occupation and the status of women in society, and militarization and the status of women in society. And that, I think, the main damage that is happening to the women in Israel. And it is fragmentizing also the women movement, as I spoke about the working class. Thank you very much for bearing with us.
Well, I just want to say that this has been a fantastic evening. I just think it's remarkable. And I want to say before you all leave, I just want to tell you that when we were planning this event, the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Stony Brook was concerned and worried. You know, and we sent around the flyer for the event, and I got asked this question. You're the Center for Study of Working Class Life. What does this have to do with the Center for Study of Working Class Life? I understand that you have an interest in this issue, and I understand that you want to bring this very important person, but is that really in your domain to do? And I said, yes, it is. And I think that tonight demonstrated that exactly. One of the things that has struck me in my work with the Iraqi labor movement, and I've done quite a bit of work in solidarity with the Iraqi labor movement in its struggle against the American occupation there, we brought Iraqi workers here to the United States and toured them around through U.S. Labor Against the War, and we had them at Stony Brook through my union. And what was so remarkable was when they told their story of what they were fighting for as working people in Iraq, it was just what we're fighting for. Our working people here, against privatization, for democratic unions that really represent their members and aren't just some Bigfoot that comes down and quashes over what workers are doing, that is opposed to the militarization of society and its terrible effects on women. We are facing, what, privatization, militarization of police, racism, the crowding out of social services from a militarized budget. We heard that as problems in Israel out of the occupation, and those are exactly what we are facing in the United States and what the working class is facing here that we are struggling with. That is no mystery that we share that because we're both settler states. The United States and Israel are both settler states where a population has come in from outside and marginalized and separated out for extra suppression the local native population, and in the case of the United States, the African population which was brought here in bondage. So that question of how do you deal with the internal, the domestic consequences of that legacy of the settler state is something that I think that we in the United States and our brothers and sisters in Israel and Palestine jointly have to figure out. And we don't know the answer all that well here. We're not too tightly wrapped on those questions. But I do want to say that our experience in bringing Iraqi workers to the United States to hear this and to speak about this with us was so powerful that it leads me to wonder and to ask whether we couldn't take this occasion to begin a process of cooperation between the U.S. labor movement, as it will cooperate, and the Palestinian labor movement and those elements of the Jewish labor movement, not the leadership of history groups. But we do know in the United States that the leadership of the AFL-CIO doesn't represent the ordinary workers or unions either. So what I think we could do is to figure out how we could have a tour of Palestinian and Jewish workers and union leaders who are working on these questions to come to the United States and help us understand, as you have helped us understand, what is really going on there and what we as American working people and as American citizens can do jointly to figure out our common legacy and our common social tasks. So I would like to continue with the ambassador, with you, and with anybody you could put us in touch with to try to figure out how to pursue that. On that note, I want to thank everybody here for coming, and we